Welcome to this panel on gaming under lockdown. I'm Laura Swinton, Editor-in-Chief of Little Black Book. We've got joining us Claudio Lima, who is from Cheil Brazil, and who also runs a podcast on marketing and gaming, conveniently enough.
Yeah, thanks.
We've got Charlotte Rubesa, who's a strategist at 72 in sunny Amsterdam, and recently wrote a really lovely piece for us, inspired by the Animal Crossing trend. We've got McKay Hathaway from VMLY&R, who's Group Creative Director and I believe worked on Wendy's big Fortnite project.
Great.
Adam Kerj, who's CCO of Accenture Interactive Nordics, and has lots of interesting things to say about creativity and technology. So welcome, everybody.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for the intro.
Yeah.
So I thought to start off, we'll start off kind of personal, get to know you all, and just find out what your own interest in the gaming world is. Are you hardcore gamers? Is it more of a professional curiosity, and what kind of games you like to play? And I guess let's start with McKay, because I hear that you are very, very into it.
Yeah, it's something, I've always played games. I grew up with it. My first job was at Leo Burnett, working on Nintendo. And so I've always kind of since the beginning had been thinking about gaming and advertising together. I have my kind of social online games that I play with my friends and family. I've got, my single player stuff that I like to get into every now and then. I have a few kids, and we play together as a family when we can. And so it's definitely something that's been a part of my life since I was young.
And what about you, Adam?
I wouldn't say I'm a hardcore gamer. I'm incredibly interested in gaming and the culture, and I got a bunch of kids too, and they play, and I used to be neighbors with Notch, the Minecraft creator, and so we got into that early, and then just seeing from that basic, building blocks now into brand plays, and just everything taking off. And I think it's just incredibly interesting to see the blurred lines and what it is and what it could be. It's just, I think it's incredibly inspiring, but also sometimes really confusing because things move so fast there, and that's what I really get intrigued by. So I play occasional first-person stuff, and then my son is into a lot of the big platform things, and so I hang around in his place, and we game together, and it's just the whole universe, I think, is super interesting and inspiring.
And what about you, Charlotte?
I think for me, growing up, I would play The Sims. So I don't know what hardcore gamers think about that, but I was obsessed with The Sims growing up. But beyond that, I think my interest in gaming is more towards Adam's kind of side too. Just like, I think for me, gaming is the most innovative, forward-thinking industry. You can't compare the progress as an industry that gaming has made versus TV or music. And I think it's just the evolving of technology and how storytelling is evolving along with it. So as a place for entertainment, I think that's where it gets really exciting for me.
And Claudio, I mean, you've got a podcast about gaming, so I'm imagining you are also quite into it.
I started early as well, as everybody with the earlier platforms, and then I ran a magazine back in 20 years ago. We ran a magazine where we would do kind of tricks and tell people reviews, and then I end up in advertising. Started work in advertising and building my career, and by to like 2003-4, World of Warcraft came out, and it really took me and to I spent thousands of hours on it. Then I had to stop a few times, but now with the quarantine, I'm back on it to
Are you?
as a second job.
Are you Horde or Alliance?
I'm Alliance. I'm a
What?
restoration druid on Alliance.
I don't even know why I invited you to this.
What character you play?
I've got a Tauren druid.
Oh, see, but we're both druids at least.
Yeah, you can see the dead plant in my background.
Oh, okay. So then, and then now I'm really just happy that both careers, because gaming was not a career, it was a hobby, but that both things finally came together. So to me, this kind of these last 2 years have been a really great moment where the thing I always liked finally became a topic in the thing that I do. So I'm really happy that this is finally happening. Oh, I can talk about gaming in meetings, and people are not going to think I'm a nerd. So I think
and so just to kick things off, when this sort of pandemic started to emerge and countries started going into lockdown, did any of you have any ideas about whether it would impact gaming or how it might interact with gaming? In terms of whether people would game more, what titles might emerge as popular. Did you have any predictions at the very start?
I'm sure a lot of people initially were like, "Oh my gosh, quarantine! I'm going to have all the time in the world to play more games." Personally, it hasn't been the case for me, but it's been interesting to kind of see what games have kind of risen to the top and as far as popularity and kind of what people have been into and what has kind of broken through during the kind of time of quarantine and isolation.
It's kind of brought a lot of non-gamers into the gaming space, which I've noticed, which is also really nice to see, actually. And also for me personally, I was playing Animal Crossing on mobile, so not as good, but I just think that's also really interesting now that there's this massive kind of shift towards people embracing gaming as entertainment, and just kind of curious where that's going to go as well. I think this lockdown has been a perfect opportunity for that to expand into culture beyond just tech and kind of more of a niche topic.
Yeah, I think especially in Brazil, because we got hit last, right? Kind of as the pandemic started in Europe, then the US, when it started here around to be really heavy around a month ago, and we are now the worst place in the world for it. I think we knew the numbers, right? And saw how gaming had really exploded, especially in Italy. I think was where the first, and then we got the numbers. We saw some numbers from Epic's our client here. So they already knew how much the platforms have been growing. And then you just at least in my house, I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. So I just saw it, right? That besides now the place where they would hang out with their friends, that before they would go to football practice or to dance lessons, now was just gaming, right? That's and between my son in Valorant that just came out and was crazy, and my daughter in Roblox and Animal Crossing, you just saw that, okay, this is gonna really boom. And I think that's a lot what I saw with the clients as well, because a lot of people were finally home for a long time, and then they saw their kids a long time in this platform. So I think it was kind of a wake-up moment for people that were finally home for weeks, and they're oh, they spend a lot of time in this, all their friends are in this. So I think there was this kind of eureka moment for a lot of the clients that we deal with, that they really saw the potential and the time spent, and as Charlotte said, not as gaming but as entertainment, right? As place to hang out, to talk about music, to listen to things. And so I think it was super interesting to see this boom happen right now.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, just from the confine of the walls at home, I think I'm not sure it's something that I can prove, but I'm just watching it. That I've seen kind of more sort of a hybrid use to it, from going, as you say, it's entertainment, but it seems like in times that we're in right now, and everybody, it's such a strange time because we're all in the exact same situation. I kind of see that it inspires a lot of other creativity that it might have been there before, but I just see that it spawns a lot of ideas. I see that even with clients, that they're more open-minded, probably because there's a lot of gaming going on at their homes. And so my reflection is that, and I have slightly older kids, but I see them going from all these different platforms to entertainment to gaming, and then sitting down, creating their own music and music tracks to all kind of things. So it's sort of it's like everybody's in a game at some time at home and doing different things because of somebody's gaming, and then somebody's playing an instrument, and somebody started writing a story. So I think it boosts creativity in a way that I haven't seen before. Maybe it has always done that. It's just so obvious right now, and it's much more part of the everyday screens, I guess. Yeah. And then you see, of course, the concerts and the games being, the platforms. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a really interesting thought, the idea that these games either inspire or motivate some sort of creativity, because just as a form of entertainment, they're inherently kind of leaning forward and interactive anyway,
Yeah, my son, just a short reflection, I'm not going to talk too much, but my son had an interesting reflection, and he got this assignment at school going into university. This was about 4 or 5 years ago. He wrote a piece that, because we were living in New York at the time, and he was just reflecting on that school that he went to, that it was so many kids trying to get in on these athletic scholarships. And he just wrote a great piece that he thought that it would be just, if not even more important, to get the same merit based on your gaming skills and your coding kind of abilities. And then randomly, that like 2 weeks after, New York Times did a piece on that and said, hey, we need to look at these, because these kids, they have so many interesting skills that could be useful, just going against the old debate that it's not good, gaming is not good, but it actually is. And he thought that could be a qualification to get e-gaming scholarships. And maybe that's happened now, I don't know, but it was just an interesting reflection.
Yeah, and talking about eSports and e-gaming, that was one area that we editorially kind of thought would be a big story. So we did a piece. My colleague spoke to Claudio, actually, and we've definitely seen some TV stations in the US, some in the UK, kind of pick up things like FIFA and things like that, but I don't know if it has had the same impact on esports that we thought it would. And I was just wondering if you guys had any observations on that or thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think esports grew, but it grew more naturally than gaming overall. Mm-hmm. And I feel of course, there was the betting aspect. I think it helped it grow a lot, because it became kind of, for a few weeks, the only betting option that you would have, and how much money the betting companies are throwing into media. But I feel that esports, although they kept happening, and now I think it kind of was good for them to normalize, for people to see them on TV and feel normal about it. So I think that was the main achievement the esports got in these last few months. But as any kind of sport, and as you're seeing now, German soccer, football just came back, and it's more boring to watch it without fans, right? And I feel esports had such an energetic fan base, when you see the events on TV and you had all the fans screaming, it kind of really esports is suffering from the same problem all other sports are having, of not having the audience, right? Although they can be played online and you watch it and you still, but the event, right? Like the going to it, the buying gear, like all of that, esports suffered a lot. So I feel it grew, but it didn't grow to like as gaming grew overall, right? I feel gaming, the entertainment aspect grew more than the competitive aspect for me.
Yeah, I
like
mean, we
Sorry, go
saw. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We were talking this morning. In the UK, I think BT Sport has been showing current soccer players playing against retired players playing FIFA, and that's definitely not about the pro level competition, right? That's just fun, and it's a way to fill space, and it has been the sports like the FIFA's, the video games based on real sports. You know, there is kind of place for them, rather than, it's not like we've suddenly seen everybody watching COD or Overwatch or what have you. I don't know.
But I think a lot of sports like have tried to recreate, like to both your points, like have tried to recreate something virtually, as a lot of these sports couldn't happen in real life. And you've seen a lot of experiments with that, like the Formula One, but also Flanders Classics. They did like a pro cycling race, basically, where they had real cyclists and professional cyclists kind of race from their living rooms while their avatars are kind of brushing shoulders in real time on the course. So that was kind of impressive how they took a real world sport and kind of merged into it some elements of esports. So I think also just lending some of those mechanics of esports into traditional sport, I think, is also a really interesting kind of formula, that it's not necessarily one versus the other. It can be both, and there's elements of both that are super valuable. And I think with this particular example as well, like cycling is generally quite an aging sport. So by bringing in these esports elements or mechanics, they also saw crazy kind of engagement with a younger crowd, because it was just like, you saw this, you know, your avatar moving, but there was a real athlete putting in the effort behind the moving avatar. So it just adds an extra layer to esports as well as to kind of real sports.
And I mean, the cycling example is really interesting, because that's one of the only kind of physical pieces of physical activity that's been allowed in a lot of places under lockdown, is jumping on your bike.
That's true.
I mean, I guess the games that have really won, this is a competition, but are Fortnite and Animal Crossing seem to be the ones that everyone is getting excited about, and it's that sort of social hub aspect to it, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that, about why it has been games that people have chosen to as a hub for socializing rather than any other platform necessarily.
You know, I think for a long time, you know, gaming hasn't necessarily struggled, but you know, it's kind of been on the outside of, you know, mainstream, acceptance and being kind of socially accepted and just something that everybody's embraced. And we've seen that shift start to happen over the years for a while now. You know, I feel like Nintendo did a lot of work with the Wii and the DS, you know, so long ago, and then it kind of paved the way for Apple to then come in with the App Store and put a gaming device in everybody's pocket. So you've kind of seen this shift and kind of this acceptance, and even to like broader kind of what I would call nerd culture, you know, with the rise of comic book movies being this big thing. And, you know, you've seen these books like Game of Thrones turn into these cultural phenomenons and kind of take over. And so I feel like there's been this shift happening for a while now, but the real shift that's been most interesting to me is how gaming has shifted as an industry to accept social as a piece. You know, the PS4, you know, they put a share button on the controller, which is something that hadn't been done before, you know, and they embraced and encouraged, you know, people hopping online, connecting their, gaming consoles or their accounts to their social media accounts to encourage that sharing and that behavior. You know, Sony has kind of pioneered this photo mode, you know, to encourage people to pause the game, take a picture, share it online, and kind of instill that behavior of getting people to share their experiences on social. I feel like you've seen the shift. I mean, Nintendo has been so strict in the past, you know, with what they've allowed streamers and you know, people on YouTube, people on social to share of their games, and even they have embraced, you know, social media for that purpose and allowed people to share their games and start to build that into the games themselves. So I feel like you're now kind of seeing this culmination of gaming being accepted, but gaming also accepting social, and kind of this, you know, Animal Crossing being this shining example of all that finally kind of coming together and paying off, where you see this collective, you know, group online having this shared experience and really embracing it. And it's been, you know, it's quite the stroke of luck for Nintendo to have that game that's like the perfect. You know, piece of content and entertainment for a situation like this. So pretty amazing. That's something obviously they could have planned for, you know, because Animal Crossing has been around for a while. It's, you know, this is arguably the best it's been. But man, what a awesome opportunity for them to have this game about escaping onto a beautiful island, you know, and really just getting away for a time when everybody is stuck inside.
It was a perfect launch strategy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Completely.
They're lucky, right? I mean, Nintendo is super, but they always have those to like they're going a little slow, then Pokemon comes along, right? Like they're going a little slow, and then something else comes along. They always have these things they pull out of the bag to like that kind of become mainstream. But one thing I think on the social aspect, right? If you go back to the 80s, right? Like in the arcades, I think like gaming is it's always been social in a sense to like where people get together to like around something they all like and appreciate, like with everything else, right? Like there are people that do exhibition for dogs and all that kind of stuff. But I think gaming to like, because it can talk about so many interests to like it's really natural for it to become a social platform, like and we see now this term of game as a service, right? Like as before you would go and buy a game and you would finish and you'd buy another one. Now it's a service, right? Like for example, World of Warcraft is up for 16 years. So like there some people like me, I pay it for 16 years. I pay $15 a month to like, so I don't know. I need to calculate how much that amounts to. But I just feel like 16 years ago, even before Facebook or anything else, it was a place like where you had the guilds and you would hang out and you would discuss things and you would go to not Discord at the time to like, but TeamSpeak and like you would just kind of connect and create the Ventrilo. I think it was even before that. So you would connect and create these like little communities around. So I feel it's now to like with Animal Crossing, Fortnite, to like you get the Riot games, especially Valorant that just became a storm in the last 3 weeks. They became places where my kids go to meet their friends, right? Like Roblox, my daughter has this community with the people from her class and she's 11, right? But she's always with them the whole day. Before they would go home and they would like not talk to each other until the next day. Now they're up to like the whole day until you have to tell her to go to bed. So I think it's a supernatural for gaming to be the social place.
Yeah.
It is the third social space, I think, and it's interesting to see the resources behind now and the hype before game, you know, new versions roll out, etc. I think it's amazing. And just looking, I think Fortnite is have passed like $250 million a month in revenue and like $80 in gamer per average. So it's also that social space where obviously brands take an interest if you look at what it is and where all these people hang out. It's just it's such a force of nature that I think also going back a few years ago, with coinciding with the explosion of like, you know, YouTube in 2015, 2016, it kind of is, it's just it's a perfect mix or storm of so many social connections, and it's all intertwined, you know, and it's about that identity, and every platform has its own memes, its own culture, and its own language, and its own jokes, etc. And if you don't know them, you know, it's like you're not in, you're on the outside. So it is that aspect too, I think, that's so interesting.
And I think also during lockdown, just one thing to add, like, you guys have probably felt the same, but you're constantly on Zoom or on, you know, video chats or house party, where you're constantly connecting with people in that way, while, yeah, games are allowing you to connect to people in different ways and actually, you know, not just talk face to face and have a conversation, but it's like building something, or it's contributing to a story, or it's showing off your island in Animal Crossing. So there's a lot of new ways that we're finding in terms of like connecting with one another, which is just really exciting as well. Like, it's, I think, yeah, it's just opening a lot of doors and bringing kind of that whole world into the more mainstream media and audiences.
That, I mean, that's such an interesting observation, because I think particularly when we've been in lockdown, we've been apart from people, and you want to hang out, but the thing with sort of, I don't know, FaceTiming your mom or whatever, it's not really natural to just sit down for an hour and have a conversation with your mom. You hang out, you don't always speak, you do other stuff around each other, and gaming's almost that space where you can just be, and you don't actually always have to be talk, because you run out of stuff to talk about.
It's true.
Yeah, it's true.
Even those quizzes, you know, Zoom, like everyone's been doing a million quizzes as well, and you're just like, at some point it just gets really old and, you know, repetitive.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. As how with gaming there's always an activity, right? And I think to like it's, as you said, you're building something, you're teaming up to like kill a monster, but there's always to like, it's not just, and I agree with you, like just sitting down and talk, yeah, and to like you can do that, but you don't have that much thing to talk about. At least I don't, right? Like with some people. So that's why you go to places and bars and restaurants, right? Like where you see other people and you get around. So I think gaming kind of brings that environment, right? And it's, especially if you go like Fortnite now with the party island, it's to like the way it's trying to like in creating this environment where you are in, but there's a lot of things for you to talk about that you can just to like kind of watch, right? So I think it's super interesting, that proximity that gaming is bringing to like that. It's a common interest, but also like there's always something new to like, and you can talk about stuff, but you can always like experience stuff as well. So I think it's what makes it kind of more interesting.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
I've always
so neutral. It's so neutral, and you can come and you can go most platform as you want, and most, there's no penalty. It's just so accessible that it's amazing and inclusive too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always said, like I play with my brothers often. We all live in different states across the country, and I've always said that, gaming is just kind of an excuse to get together and just talk. As Claudio was saying, it's just kind of something there's something going on, but for the most part, you're just kind of creating that social space where you can have that conversation. But also when you run out of things to say, you can kind of refocus back on the game and then chat again. So it just kind of creates this space to do that. And I think with everybody being in quarantine, and I think everybody's gotten more comfortable with these digital interactions and existing in a digital or virtual space and having conversations that way, and getting more personal, or having spending more time. So I feel like everybody now, if anything, quarantine has made everybody comfortable with these sorts of interactions, which gamers have been doing for a while. But I feel like now it's opening up, and increasing everybody's comfort levels with this type of interaction.
Yeah, everyone's catching up with the gamers.
Yeah.
I think also like Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that people are kind of adjusting to virtual life and seeing it as more normal now than it was.
Sure.
And I think people used to think that it was, you know, disconnecting you from reality and isolating you, while actually it's so social, it's so creative. Like you're, you know, developing skills and meeting people and, you know, having experiences that aren't any less real than real life in that way.
I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see the sort of the knock-on effect from all this, because I think, as with most things in lockdown, it's not that new trends have emerged, it's just sped up things that were kind of around the corner. So, you know, like you said, you've got brands suddenly seeing how much their, you know, marketers seeing how much their kids are playing games. You've got people who might have maybe not, you know, they might have played a game but not with voice on or something, right? And now they're doing it. And it's just sped everything up. So I kind of, it's going to be really exciting to see the creativity that comes out the other end of that, you know?
Yeah, I think like you, and I think you're already seeing, especially on streamers and YouTubers and all, to like those guys that deal with gaming already, to communicate to a larger audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think to like, I'm seeing really cool videos and ideas of challenges that people are doing. To like, so I feel, and one thing that this is already happening, right, from a couple of years, that a lot of the really creative people are not coming to the agencies anymore, unfortunately, right? Like they're becoming streamers and YouTubers and telling stories in other ways. So I feel to like, hopefully, and the agencies always catch up to like, because I think are super agile companies that are able to do that. But I think right now where I'm seeing most creative things around gaming, to like, it's with these influencers and streamers, like in the way they are captivating their audiences, to like with new little contests, to like in new kind of ways to do videos, and the way that to like they create little challenges. So it's really interesting to see how they keep to like audience of sometimes 5-6 million people engaged to like weekly with like 2 or 3 videos, and people are still engaged. So I think it's very interesting to see the creativity out there and see how we can bring that to like to the agencies, to the clients, like to brands, to connect with the audience the same way.
And at the same speed, hopefully, too, right?
Yeah.
Yes, without research.
It's such a different experience creating in something that is live and real time. It's just a different, amazing universe where you have to behave so differently than what we're as agency, you know, just a few years back, and going into this universe, it's just widely different, and there's so many opportunities that I don't think we haven't seen the tip of the iceberg yet. And also with technology changing by every quarter now, it's just the opportunities to do interesting things there, if you're geared up for it, I think is amazing. Although, you know, at the same time, you have to strike the right balance, as you don't want to pile in there.
Yeah, that's true. Have you guys seen any, you know, what brands have you seen that have been doing interesting things over this time in terms of gaming?
Oh, I think McKay's here, but Wendy is like it's always the example to like that we either talk about, or someone brings to like to a meeting and say, have you seen what Wendy's did? And I think it's was super interesting. But even like competitors from Wendy's, and just to be in the US, like KFC has created the KFC gaming like initiative, where they kind of more as building a community in social media, and really being super engaged in that. MasterCard to like has had a big presence, but more as like traditional sponsors, but supporting. And I feel especially, and I just want to break in 2 areas, right? Gaming and eSports, where I think there's a very clear like difference in the way that you support esports, where a community is more to like has, how can I say, more closed, and it's more to like aware, and it's more vengeful if you do something wrong, to like they really cancel your brand, like, so you really need to be more careful in esports. As in gaming, to like I think it's more open and fun, and people are like the Wendy's idea again, just like people, oh, this is fun to like, and I'm here to have fun. So I feel it's brands are trying to circulate this, both universes to like within the same universe of gaming, but it's there are really some people doing some really cool stuff. And I think one thing important is how the teams and esports organizations are also becoming amazing brands, right? If you get like Cloud9, FaZe Clan, which is the shirt I'm wearing, 100 Thieves, to like, you see these guys selling gear to like Adidas sells Yeezy shoes, right? Like they do the drops to like they have this scarcity strategy for their gear. So it's really interesting to see how they are becoming very powerful brands as well.
And then on the flip side, it's been sort of lovely to see in Animal Crossing. You've got things like Marc Jacobs and Valentino,
Sure.
which is, you know, and it also shows that sort of broadening of gaming. And it's not just, you know, I think there's obvious brands that have always been associated with gaming. So it's kind of nice to see that a broader mix sort of come in, new category.
I think fashion is kind of up there with gaming as like an industry that's super ahead of its game and like really embracing technology and, you know, the changes in technology and changes in consumers and more of a drive towards sustainability. And you see so much, like I think recently also fashion canceled, or there was a brand that canceled seasons because they thought that's just like promoting waste. But I think, so having brands like Valentino and Marc Jacobs make clothing for Animal Crossing, I think is super quick. They were super quick at doing that. But still, I think for me, at least during lockdown and maybe generally, but I think a lot of the most interesting and creative kind of stuff comes from the community, and it kind of starts at the community. And when brands catch on at some point, then they start to mirror a lot of these behaviors. And I feel like that's where brands can actually add value now, is like adding to these experiences. And, you know, I think there's a real appetite as well for brands to add and to build into them, like these fashion brands have been doing, as opposed to interrupting. And maybe, that's also the difference between esports and sponsorship deals versus, you know, more nimble, you know, examples like the Fortnite and Wendy's, for example. But yeah, there's lots of space for brands to engage. It just needs to happen quickly and creatively, and you know, also really listening to the community and what they like and how they spend their time.
Yeah, and one area that I think is interesting with gaming that, I mean, Fortnite again has been fantastic, is this sort of blending of media. So the Travis Scott concert was huge, and then at the weekend, I think it was this weekend, they dropped the trailer for the new Christopher Nolan movie in Fortnite. So it's this bleed between different kinds of platforms and media is really interesting. Gaming seems to be the melting pot.
Yeah, with the Christopher Nolan one, you know, that was particularly interesting to me. It's like, if you would have asked me a few weeks ago or before this started, like, would Chris Nolan ever release a trailer in a video game, I would say no way, you know, because he is such a proponent of the shared experience in the theater and getting people together. You know, he talks about that often. But what was interesting about this is, I think it solved the problem for both parties. You know, Chris, he wanted to have that collective experience, which is impossible right now. And, you know, I think all the people you know, they're enjoying their time in Fortnite, but I think people are craving some extended or, you know, deeper social activity or connectivity. And so I think by releasing a trailer like that in the game, that, you know, kind of created that collective experience that, you know, what Chris Nolan would be happy about, but it also kind of gave everybody a different or new or, you know, unique reason to come together again. And so I think by finding opportunities like that, where, you know, there's a deeper problem being solved, or a deeper insight to what's going on, as opposed to just a paid sponsorship or just, you know, throwing money and doing just a sponsored piece of content or whatever. I think that's what makes things like that, you know, so interesting and different. You know, that shared interest and, you know, that insightful problem solving that goes on there.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've been sort of wondering as well is, obviously, again, like gaming touches all ages, but the kids seem really into it. And I just wonder what knock-on effect it will have as sort of children and teenagers grow up used to having these shared experiences in virtual worlds, and it being quite mainstream amongst their age group. And the knock-on effect, what does that mean for the office of the future or the, you know, the workplace? Will they expect to have these worlds in a virtual environment? I'm really interested in how that's going to affect deeper culture and the expectations of this younger generation.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've mentioned before is how we are just accelerating things, right? Like I think this pandemic just brought 5 to like 10 years of acceleration to a lot of things, especially this thing of working remotely, right? And how so like now, if I'm pretty sure every one of us thinks like, do we really need to go to the agency every day, right? Like, is it something that really, if I work from the agency, like just when I have meetings, because we are all producing, right? Like we're all having meetings and doing things. So I feel, especially for this younger generation and with new technologies and things like HoloLens and everything it's coming to, like, I really feel that gaming environments, and here, just like one technical part, I don't know if you guys saw the trailer for the Unreal 5 engine, right?
Yeah.
That Epic just is launching. So I feel if you see what Unreal 5 can do to, like, in terms of creating these digital worlds and to like bringing a level of detail to like for you, and we still don't know what it can do in virtual reality or how it can be applied there. But I just feel that it becomes like natural that more and more like we'll stay home more, like, especially because why would I take an hour traffic to do a meeting if we can do like this with people from around the world, right? So I feel it's gonna be a thing for my kids to, like, completely natural to just, okay, everybody hop on to like the Oasis, like, let's use that reference, and let's have a meeting. Like I feel that's gonna be super normal.
And so, and just because, you know, a lot of the conversation today and a lot of the stories that we've seen written about gaming and lockdown have been around the social aspect. Now, I'm actually quite an antisocial person, and I wonder if there's a risk that, kind of by design, social games will be talked about more, and that's why we're seeing Fortnite and Animal Crossing. But you know, I love like a Dragon Age or a Red Dead Redemption. I love a fantasy and escape, and I wonder if by having so much focus on this connection and the social aspect, if brands might lose sight of the sort of fantasy and the storytelling and the other sort of magical side of games. I don't know.
I sure hope not. You know, I'm with you, and you know, I think that was a lot of discussion a while ago, as you saw. You know, Claudio kind of mentioned the games as a service really start to pick up, and it seems like every major publisher at a time a couple of years ago had their version of that. You know, from Destiny to the Division. You know, WoW's been around for a while, but I feel like everybody had started to dip their toe into that. And just for me personally, I feel like, you know, Sony, with their PlayStation, you know, especially their first party stuff, you know, they really doubled down on the single player, you know, story focused experience, you know, with games like, you know, a Spider-Man and a God of War and The Last of Us. And, you know, they seem to be providing that. So, you know, hopefully there just maintains a balance. I mean, we'll see what comes out of this and where things shift. You know, it's with game development, it is interesting because it takes so long. You know, it's almost like we probably won't see the effects of this, you know, for a few more years even, you know. But, you know, things like Fortnite and these living games have found a way to speed that up a little bit and be a little more contextual with their releases and being able to move quickly. But, you know, I guess we'll see soon what happens.
And I guess just looking over the next few months, I think I've got to the point where I'm not going to make predictions anymore about coronavirus, because they're always wrong and everything always changes. But it seems that different countries around the world are starting to ease up, lift some restrictions. Do you think that these behaviours will stick? Do you think we might see a dip, you know, as people sort of can go outside and meet up more? Is it, I don't know what I'm trying to say, is this like a sort of slight sort of spiking down and then back to that sort of slower trajectory, or do you think things have just radically changed throughout it? I know it's quite a big question.
That's the question. Yeah, I feel like, I mean, you, again, don't want to predict anything and can't predict anything, but I feel like now, as we've spoken about, it's kind of been normalized somewhat to have these experiences, these virtual kind of mass experiences, that actually there's a lot of really big wins from experimenting with these mass virtual formats. So hopefully there will be some of the best parts of experimenting that we've done that we bring forward, and then, you know, what hasn't served anybody, we just leave that behind. But, you know, in a mass virtual event, you can, you know, bring people together from all over the world. You can, you know, there's so many benefits from having an event like this. And it doesn't even mean necessarily having virtual versus physical, right? It's how can you augment the physical experience with a virtual layer, or how can you know, do it the other way around? So I think it's more around just that normalization of virtual life, and hopefully also coverage in media, and how this virtual life and how gaming in general is, it's part of culture, and it's not just a niche or a geeky kind of part of life. I think that's behind us. I think that's history now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I agree.
These restrictions aren't going to bring people that weren't physically close to you, you know, that lived in different cities, any closer. I mean, you're still going to have that challenge to get over. I think you might see initially people craving like tactile and physical experiences, but I feel like, you know, the restrictions aren't going to change where people are physically. And if you live across the country or across the world from somebody, you're still going to need that virtual experience or that augmented experience to connect with them. So again, it's like, I feel like this has accelerated everybody's comfort levels with these types of experience and acceptance. And so I think you will, you know, see it just be more universally adopted and accepted, and just kind of the new normal, as people are starting to say.
Yeah, and there's also the relationships that were formed, right? I think a lot of people made gaming friends to like people that did missions together, or people that do like you kind of. So I think you want to keep that, and that's gaming. And then there's always winter, right? And I think you guys especially more than me here in South America, do like you guys have to deal with winter, which is like there's nothing better to do than stay home and play video games.
Yeah, I have my youngest. She's graduating high school now, so that's been interesting. And they can't graduate in the real life, and so they've gone through the last month now, and the graduation is coming up in a few days, and it's interesting to see such an iconic event taking place on all these different screens. They jump between these games, and you know, makes you feel and reflect on the education they manage. So it's going to be interesting to see that whole universe now that they've seen that it could actually be done. And there's a lot of interesting articles in the US specifically, that I've read that's interesting about the value of, the college experience and everything. And so that's an interesting area. See where that goes now that they've pressure tested it and see that it could be done. Could it be augmented? Could it be even better in the future thanks to this? Maybe,
How is she graduating then? What's the plan?
So the plan is that they're allowing one parent to we have a slot time where we can be, and then we have to get back to where we live, and so they have this virtual class graduation, and then they meet up in one specific place. Everything is very controlled, and they've been very frustrating, but putting their graduation clothes on at home, and it's just it's wild. It's just it is like living in a game for them. So everything is happening that they do. Like we've all done that. Now they're going through this whole experience, almost like an in-game experience, and so it's so, I don't even know sometimes when it's real or when we're in virtual world. It's such blurred lines right now. And I think now after 2-3 months, she doesn't even know either, and she doesn't really reflect anymore where they are, if they're meeting or if it's just happening here. It's just mind-blowing and how fast that goes, and maybe that will disappear just as fast as it arrived. I don't know. It's interesting. It's hard to predict.
Well, I mean, it's I think you're right that it's gonna have created some sort of mindset shift.
Yeah.
And it might be that people are there's maybe less barriers and less apprehension to engaging in different kinds of digital experiences. But yeah, maybe the next panel or next year's Cannes should be hosted in Fortnite. Yeah,
we'll go to the island.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if they do rosé there though. Listen, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really interesting. Great to hear all your different perspectives on this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank you so much. Nice meeting everybody.
Yeah.